Thank you so much, Laddie. And we start from the biggest news of today, at least it concerns major economies in the world, is the FOMC meeting today. The Federal Reserve Bank would be meeting, and then we will hear their decision concerning the interest rate. But a bit of background to that. So far this year, we saw that in January when they met, they voted to hold the target range steady at 3.50 to 3.75. That was the first decision of the year in January. And then the next one was in March. There was also a hold there. The range still between 3.50 and 3.75%. In April, they still led the benchmark. So of course, we've known that for the most of this year, from last year, a lot of uncertainty. First of all, we had to deal with tariffs, and then in February we started dealing with the Iran-US-Israel war, and that has affected the stability that the world was enjoying, especially when it comes to energy cost. And energy cost affects every other thing, especially in the United States, not just in the emerging markets. And so we saw that uncertainty. Even late last year, we were hoping that there'll be more cuts. So after April, the next meeting was in June. And June also, we saw that they kept the target still there. So far this year, it's been hold 3.50 to 3.75. They maintained the interest rate and paid on reserve balances at 3.7. July, that's what we are expecting today. Expectations widely centered on another pause amid surging oil prices, ongoing policy reviews, and just when we thought that peace was coming that way, Iran yesterday disrupted that. There was a strike from Iran yesterday, and then we don't know how the U.S. is going to respond to this. But let's speak to our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, now to give us perhaps some background information of what she's been hearing, what we could expect from the meeting today, especially considering this latest strike coming from Iran. Hi, Maria. Good morning.
Good morning.
Quite early for you, but thank you for joining us. Waking up early and all of that. But what are you hearing? Is it another hold?
This will likely be another hold, but they're expecting this to be a very historic meeting. We know that the chairman was put in place expecting to align with what the president was hopeful for, to see interest rates drop. But there's only about a 30% expectation that there will be a drop in interest rates. 70% of most markets believe that it'll be about a 70% stay. And so it looks as if we're going to be staying. I mean, as you mentioned, the war right now, as you mentioned, the strike from Iran most recently, and as you also mentioned, the oil prices, which creating major challenge for the U.S. And noting, too, that we're still challenged with inflation. Inflation continues to be a struggle for the United States. And when we see inflation on the rise, or we see inflation not controllable, oftentimes the Federal Reserve will decide to keep interest rates steady.
Yeah, and with this latest strike by Iran, have we heard anything from the White House, response or anything like that?
Well, as we know, yesterday the White House welcomed the president of the Ukraine and also the president of Israel, and also we know that the senator passed yesterday. So yesterday was a very busy day for the White House. We can expect that probably later on today we'll hear more in regards to that. We know that strikes have been exchanged back and forth. Will we just see what we've seen over the last couple of weeks? Potentially. But I think the greatest challenge is really going to be around how the Federal Reserve will be responding right now to this inflation. And so at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is around 7 p.m. In Nigeria, we will be hearing from the Federal Reserve Chairman, Kevin WARSH, as it relates to what will happen with these interest rates.
Yeah, so what would another hold, what impact could it have for the people, for prices and all?
So another hold will really just mean steady. Another hold will mean that we won't really see much change in the buying power of Americans, and I think that's some of the concern as we begin to head toward the end of the summer and fall. Fall is often a time where people begin to buy. They begin to start looking at ending out their year, and so oftentimes people will move in that direction. But with interest rates staying steady, we will probably just see a flatlining in buying, which potentially could mean that we still still will struggle with inflation. But again, it's not very common that you'll see the Federal Reserve begin to drop interest rates when you're still struggling with inflation. And to the greater point that you mentioned earlier, we're still unsure as to where the U.S.-Iran conflicts will end.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty there, Maria. Thank you so much for that, and we know that you keep us updated, especially reactions from the markets. We'll be able to get that tomorrow. Thank you for joining the program. All right, now, and then one of the factors that the FOMC would be considering, that's Iranian attack. The U.S. said that they intercepted an Iranian attack on military bases, ending a days-long pause in fighting and increasing the risk of a return to full-blown war in the Middle East. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, they had launched multiple ballistic missiles at U.S. forces based in the Middle East. They did that yesterday night, Tuesday, what the U.S. military described as attempted surprise attack. But all of the missiles were intercepted, they say, and no casualties were reported. Well, in a post on X, CENTCOM said that the missiles were launched from Iran at about 5:45 p.m. Eastern Time, and it said all incoming ballistic missiles were successfully intercepted and that U.S. forces remain vigilant and at high state of readiness. Abu Dhabi National Oil Company is pushing on with liquefied natural gas exports from its Persian Gulf plant, even as there's renewed hostilities in the region and forcing producers to cut visible traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. And an empty LNG carrier owned by ADNOC's shipping arm appeared in the Persian Gulf earlier today after traversing the waterway with its location broadcasters turned off. This is according to ship data, and it marks a rare crossing with visible traffic through the strait essentially halted since that Qatari LNG ship was attacked earlier this month. Meanwhile, Eurozone government bond yields have pushed higher as 3% surge in crude oil prices, a growing anxiety over potentially hawkish U.S. Federal Reserve decision that's reigniting near-term inflation fears across European fixed income markets. And the rate-sensitive German 2-year yield, which closely tracks short-term monetary policy expectations, that went up 2.76%, reversing earlier declines. Meanwhile, the benchmark German 10-year bond yield climbed 3.12%, urging back towards multi-year peaks as selling pressures resume across foreign debt raised. The bond market sell-off followed a sharp jump in energy prices triggered by joint U.S. and Saudi airstrikes on Iran-backed targets in Iraq and the interception of Iranian ballistic missiles in regional airspace. And India's government expects Parliament to pass a bill that formalizes tax cuts for foreign investors buying its foreign debt. And the legislation's bipartisan nature will cut through other contentious debates, according to the people. And this is supposed to pass a simple majority vote and can be passed by a voice vote, according to Parliament. BMW AG is offering voluntary severance packages to thousands of its workers in Germany. The car maker is trying to become leaner to better compete with rivals from China. The manufacturer expects departures in Germany to account for most of about 8,000 positions that it's looking to cut globally. And it is the latest in a series of restructuring moves by the country's embattled auto industry. And after piling into chip stocks and what they call AI winners, investors are now rushing to cut this exposure and rebalance portfolios. Even allowing for that, an acceleration of the sell-off in recent days over China competitiveness looks premature. The reversal in artificial intelligence trade this month has been severe. UBS Group basket of shares geared towards AI spending includes semiconductors, is trailing one of the stocks that's deemed at risk of AI disruption by a record of 42% points. While the dramatic turnaround follows months of outperformance This illustrates a sudden unwind of excessive positioning, especially within the chip sector. And we end in Russia, where that country has charged billionaire Telegram co-founder Pavel Durov with aiding terrorism and accusing him of allowing the popular messaging app to be used by Ukrainian security services. Well, Mr. Durov is 41 as placed on the international wanted list, and Russia's Federal Security Service, known as the FSB, said that in a statement. I wonder how this will affect the crypto community. This is closely related to them. But those are the stories we have for you from the global space.